For generations, Hollywood cultivated a dream: elegant men in tailored tuxedos, flawless starlets gliding across red carpets, and silver screen idols who seemed carved from marble. The public saw perfection, airbrushed, manicured, sculpted by armies of studio publicists. But behind all that glittering polish hid something much more human. And sometimes, much smellier. Old Hollywood wasn't only a factory of dreams, it was also a carefully sealed vault of secrets. Studios had entire departments dedicated to burying the messy, awkward, or downright unpleasant realities of their stars' personal lives. Publicists followed actors like shadows, plucking cigarettes from hands, adjusting hems, handing out chewing gum, and keeping journalists far away from anything that might crack the illusion. Yet, as decades passed and insiders finally felt free to speak, stories emerged, quietly at first, whispered in memoirs, buried in interviews, scattered across biographies. Stories of stars who looked godlike on screen but who, in private, dealt with dental problems, chronic sweat, neglected hygiene, mental distress, or simply a rebellious disregard for society's expectations. This documentary explores some of the most enduring anecdotes, recollections, and pieces of Hollywood lore about the hygiene struggles of 15 iconic stars. Some rumors may be exaggerated, others are backed by multiple accounts. All of them reveal something deeper about the reality behind the illusion. Welcome to the real smell of Hollywood's golden age. 1. Clark Gable, the king with a not-so-royal breath. Clark Gable wasn't just a movie star. He was the movie star. Women swooned, men copied his mustache, and Gone with the Wind cemented him as Hollywood royalty. But there's a detail the studio never advertised, a long-standing rumor about his breath. Gable lost many of his teeth in his early 30s due to severe gum disease, which led to dentures, an extremely uncommon situation for a young, handsome leading man. According to numerous colleagues and biographers, the dentures caused chronic halitosis despite daily efforts to manage it. Vivien Leigh herself is said to have dreaded filming romantic scenes with him. Crew members reported strategizing camera angles to reduce close-up kiss takes. Marilyn Monroe, who idolized him, supposedly laughed about needing fresh air after rehearsals. Was it exaggerated? Possibly. Was it persistent? Absolutely. Gable's charm was magnetic, but apparently, not always minty fresh. 2. Joan Crawford, glamour built on pain. Joan Crawford prided herself on immaculate grooming. Her home was spotless, her wardrobe immaculate, her eyebrows sculpted to perfection. But behind her famously sophisticated appearance was a private battle with dental issues. Early facial surgeries and cosmetic dental procedures, performed long before modern techniques, left her with chronic gum problems and infections. Several makeup artists mentioned that Crawford's breath could be unpleasant on bad days, simply because she was in pain. Still, Crawford demanded perfection from herself. She soaked her face in ice baths every morning, plucked her eyebrows until they were razor thin, and maintained a beauty routine that consumed hours. Her dental issues were one of the only things she couldn't control, and in an era obsessed with flawless femininity, she suffered largely in silence. 3. Marilyn Monroe, a bombshell with a casual approach to cleanliness. No one embodied the fantasy of Hollywood like Marilyn Monroe. But colleagues often recalled that off-camera, she had surprisingly relaxed hygiene habits. Makeup artists said she sometimes avoided bathing for days and skipped deodorant, which, during long shoots under hot studio lights, created awkward moments. Monroe reportedly preferred natural scents over soaps or perfumes, a philosophy that didn't always translate well to cramped sound stages. Her bed sheets? Rarely changed, according to housekeepers. Her apartment? Chaotic. But Monroe wasn't careless out of laziness. Many biographers argue she lived life in emotional freefall, perpetually late, perpetually distracted, perpetually overwhelmed. Her hygiene challenges became part of the complicated portrait of a woman adored by millions yet struggling privately with insomnia, anxiety, and loneliness. 4. Howard Hughes, from perfectly groomed to profoundly neglected. Howard Hughes arrived in Hollywood as a charismatic, sharply dressed mogul. Yet by midlife, he had descended into a world of severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. According to testimonies from his personal staff, Hughes developed extreme fear of germs, avoided bathing, and often isolated himself in darkened rooms for months. He stored his urine in jars, covered his hands with tissues, and let his hair and nails grow wildly. Curiously, he demanded obsessive hygiene from the women he pursued, requiring medical examinations and hyper-detailed grooming standards. The irony was stark, a man terrified of contamination, yet increasingly unable to care for himself. 5. Errol Flynn, a swashbuckling legend with a swashbuckling smell. Errol Flynn lived fast, partied harder, and rarely paused long enough for a shower. His heavy drinking left a distinct smell that co-stars often commented on, alcohol mixed with sweat. Wardrobe teams reported that his costumes absorbed the odor so deeply they required special cleaning. He sometimes wore the same clothes for days, stumbling from one party to a film set without sleep. Friends joked that Flynn could seduce anyone, but not their noses. He died young, his charisma undiminished but his lifestyle engraved in Hollywood lore. 6. Marlon Brando, the genius who defied grooming. Brando approached hygiene the way he approached Hollywood conventions. By ignoring them. Colleagues across multiple decades noted his refusal to wear deodorant, his reluctance to shower, and his unpredictable personal scent. During Apocalypse Now, actors struggled through close scenes because Brando reportedly hadn't bathed regularly. Some see it as a deliberate rebellion, Brando rejecting the artificiality of Hollywood beauty. Others see it as part of his growing disillusionment and emotional volatility. Regardless, the contrast between his breathtaking talent and lack of grooming became famous. 7. James Dean, the rebel who didn't bother with soap. James Dean's iconic rebel persona extended far beyond the screen. Friends described him as absent-minded, disorganized, and indifferent to hygiene. He ate with his hands, wore unwashed clothes, and sometimes went days without bathing. One girlfriend claimed he smelled like a mechanic's shop. Directors begged him to shower, Dean shrugged them off. To Dean, grooming was conformity. To Hollywood, it was a challenge. The friction between those two forces became part of his mystique, an unpolished diamond in a world of polished veneers. 8. Judy Garland, a heartbreaking consequence of a broken system. Few stars suffered under the studio system like Judy Garland. From childhood, she endured appetite suppressants, sedatives, amphetamines, and round-the-clock schedules. When her mental health declined, her self-care followed. During depressive episodes, she bathed irregularly and often wore the same clothing for days. Makeup artists worked miracles to maintain her on-screen glow. Her emotional pain, however, was harder to hide. Her hygiene struggles, far from comedic gossip, were signs of profound suffering. 9. Elvis Presley, the king with legendary charisma, and occasional breath issues. Elvis was immaculate when it came to hair, style, and stage presence. But his oral health was another story. Multiple co-stars from his mid-60s films recalled that his breath was sometimes sour or unpleasant, particularly as pharmaceuticals affected his digestion and saliva production. One actress joked that kissing Elvis was a privilege, sometimes. Elvis compensated with colognes, mints, and elaborate grooming rituals. Yet behind his carefully crafted image, he struggled with the physical toll of fame, stress, and medication. 10. Elizabeth Taylor, perfume as a shield. Elizabeth Taylor was a beauty icon of rare magnitude. But during periods of emotional turmoil, her personal hygiene became inconsistent. Some colleagues said she masked body odor with heavy perfume instead of regular bathing, especially during her most difficult years. On the set of Cleopatra, assistants reportedly left subtle hints, offering fresh costumes, scented cloths, or discreetly encouraging breaks. Taylor's hygiene wasn't constant, but her emotional life wasn't either. Her struggles were deeply human beneath the godlike image. 11. Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp with the occasional funk. Charlie Chaplin's on-screen tramp was scruffy and unwashed, but according to several sources, sometimes Chaplin himself wasn't far off. Especially during periods of creative obsession, Chaplin could disappear into his work, neglecting bathing and wearing the same clothes repeatedly. His wives and colleagues occasionally complained, though humorously, that his hygiene fluctuated with his stress levels. For a man who controlled every frame of his films, his personal life was far messier. 12. Humphrey Bogart, the man who smelled like a tough guy. Bogart's rugged charm came at a price. Decades of smoking and drinking. These habits left his breath notably harsh, according to several co-stars. Even Ingrid Bergman, who adored him professionally, requested fewer close-face shots during certain scenes. Lauren Bacall, who loved him deeply, later joked that marrying Bogey meant accepting the smell of cigarettes forever. Bogart's breath was less a hygiene failure and more a reflection of the hard-living, hard-drinking persona that defined him. 13. Rita Hayworth, beauty maintained through pain. Rita Hayworth's transformation from Margarita Cancino to the Hollywood goddess was legendary, and brutal. Electrolysis to raise her hairline. Bleaching that damaged her scalp. Harsh dyes that left her skin irritated. These procedures caused chronic scalp problems, dandruff, and discomfort. Makeup teams became experts at concealing the consequences. Hayworth herself reportedly dreaded washing her hair, as it triggered pain and bleeding. Her glamour was breathtaking, but it was built on suffering rarely acknowledged. 14. Montgomery Clift, the decline of a beautiful man. Montgomery Clift was once described as more beautiful than most women. But after his catastrophic 1956 car accident, everything changed. Painkillers, alcohol dependency, depression, and trauma eroded his grooming habits. Friends noted that Clift sometimes avoided bathing or changing clothes, especially during his darkest years. Elizabeth Taylor would quietly intervene, sending cleaners, helping him shave, or arranging support without embarrassing him. His hygiene struggles weren't gossip, they were the scars of a shattered life. 15. Tallulah Bankhead, chaos personified. Tallulah Bankhead was outrageous, brilliant, and utterly unconcerned with hygiene. She smoked thousands of cigarettes a month, drank heavily, rarely bathed, and made jokes about her own odor on talk shows. During rehearsals, co-stars complained, Bankhead responded with roaring laughter. Her hygiene was less neglect and more rebellion. In a world of polished facades, she embraced chaos with gusto. Conclusion: the stars behind the smiles. These stories, some confirmed, some rumored, all long circulated, remind us that Hollywood's golden age wasn't gilded perfection. The stars were human. Flawed. Complicated. Sometimes tragic. Sometimes hilarious. The studios hid these imperfections to maintain a fantasy. But today, they reveal the truth. Behind the most glamorous era in film history stood people who were just as messy, insecure, troubled, brilliant, and wonderfully imperfect as the rest of us. And maybe that's the real magic of Hollywood legends. Not that they were perfect, but that the world believed they were.